Hello, and welcome to everyone to the last session of the day. And it's very interesting session by my fellow Java champion, Elias Nigora. And today he's going to speak about managing testing data, and it's really very interesting session. So please be with Elias, and I'm glad to moderate this session. So
Thank, thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, guys.
I'm
I'm
gonna remove
just
myself, and you enjoy.
cool. Hi, guys. Welcome to my session. Thank you for all that are here watching this streaming. Today is a super special day because I'm not at the place I live. Actually, I'm at Dublin, and more especially at the Dublin Java user group. And yeah, and if you guys can see, just yeah, the guys are here, and super nice and special because yeah, we are here together talking about testing and coding, and now they are here to see the same presentation but live. Yeah, it's different. So my name is Elias Nogueira. I'm a software engineer, probably like you guys. I'm from Brazil, but I live in the Netherlands. I'm one of the Java champions and Oracle Ace, and one of the Java magazine in Netherlands editor, because I live in the Netherlands as well. You guys can find me and can find this presentation and the slides and projects on my Twitter, LinkedIn, GitHub, uh, Blue Sky. You guys can find me on OnlyFans. No, you cannot, but yeah, just a joke. Maybe I should open one. No, I'm kidding. Sorry. What the problem we will solve with data? And the guys here already know about it. So data without meaning is really hard to troubleshoot. So if we just look at this kind of a log, just the info like the normal logs we see in Java, the data here, it's not really understandable. If I look at the name is not like something I can relate as a name. When I look at the surname, it's the same thing. Email, the same thing. Age, actually, like age one, maybe is not correct. Address, it's just a random string there that I cannot even read it. So when you need to troubleshooting something in terms of debugging or trying to fix an issue, data like this will hold you a little bit more to understand and to copy and to start like spending more time doing this. The second thing is not prioritize the data requirements. For example, age as one. Maybe age as one is not correct. Most of the time when we do software development and we develop something, there are data requirements and restrictions, right? Like numbers of chars in something, even the age. If I'm doing somehow system for okay, only 18 plus can access this. Of course, age as one won't be allowed, but it's a valid test. But I need to really understand those data requirements to create the correct data for it. And the last problem, not last problem, but one of the problems is there is sometimes there are no patterns for data generation. So one of the ideas we can have is to create my data with fixed data. When I do it, it might work or it might not work. For example, if you're doing something for a database, you need to create something there. Probably in the second time or third time it will fail because the data is already there, it's the same. Or there's some data requirements that will make it fail. Those are three of some problems that you can have, and you can have even more with data generation. So to summarize, we have here now hard troubleshooting, not prioritize the data requirements, and no patterns for data generation, and possibly fix it. Data repetition can fix it, but we are not sure yet. How to solve those problems, so this main problem of data? I will show you 4 steps, super easy ones. And now I look like that kind of influencer say, I will teach you 4 steps to do that thing. No, it's look like this, but yeah, bear with me, that will be fine. So first one, we should define a way to generate data. The second one, we need to use a specialized tool for that, because creating something from scratch is sometimes not the ideal thing, because we do have a lot of awesome tools outside there on the internet. The third point is understanding the data requirements. And the last one is knowing test libraries for support for data. And most of the talk will be in the 3 main things. And the item 4 will be not 100% connected with whole generated data, but it will be me telling you how testing library, and actually will be JUnit 5, can support those activities. So first, we need to define a way to generate data. If you start searching on the internet about how we can generate different data, you guys might find one of these 4 links that are the most reliable ones on the internet nowadays. And they have some common words there. The first one, it's the common words or the keywords are object model, fluent builder, and test data factory. The second one, test data builders and object model. The last one is just a clean test, but it's a super nice article there. And the last one says test data builders and object model. You can see that these object model and builders are everywhere. And I will explain what this means and why this is really good, nice approach. So instead of, I just changed the object model terminology or word for it to a test data factory. Because from my end, like object model doesn't show in the meaning of what we are doing in general, but test data factory, as one of the articles actually showed there, it's more meaningful. So how we can combine this to have a ultimate way to generate data? First, we need to have model objects and use the builder pattern for that, in order to, if you need to generate something, and as any kind of developers or Java developers, every time we need to do something, we create objects to concentrate all the attributes and all the meaning of that in objects, right? Additionally to the object, of course, which is a model object, we'll have a builder pattern there to just facilitate all the things. The second one, we will apply or implement the factory pattern to generate the data, and I'll show you how to do it. So you guys already know, but it's a super simplistic one. And the last part is to having a tool to generate data for you. If we combine those 3 approaches, like in a Megazord, remember Power Rangers? If you guys are my age or older, you guys remember Power Rangers, that they combine everything, right? Then if we combine those 3 things, we have the test data factory. Yay! And if you guys don't know, they combine and then they have the Megazord. Okay. So first things first, don't judge me. I'm using Lombok here, but it's just easy to show the code actually, and just to explain. I have a model object here with like ID, name, email, amount, installments, with different data types. And you guys can see I did Lombok just to show like the code in a super nice way, an easy way actually. I have the data annotation, which will generate the getters and setters, and I have the builder, which will generate the builder pattern for me. But of course, it can generate easily through code. Cool. This is the first part. Having an object, this object is the simulation, and I have the builder and getters and setters. Then, of course, I can use the builder pattern to add or associate that data with that object. So for example, I have the simulation.builder, and for each attribute I have, I'm just associating a new data. So name, email, amount, installments, etc. And I build this object. As soon as I use the simulation, every time I press simulation dot get CPF or get name, I will have that exactly data. Super simple like that, and super easy to understand. Then, just to be able to generate the that simulation data or that model object with that data I want, instead of just having it like in a separated method, I can start in like creating some approaches. And one of the approaches for that, I can use the factory pattern to create that specific simulation. By the way, I didn't give you the context. I will show an application that will try to simulate a loan in a super nice way, not complex, just a super simple thing. But the simulation is basically a loan simulation that I need to give my initial data with how much money I want to borrow and installments I want to pay, if I want insurance or not, and then I can like have this data. And here I'm creating a method saying, hey, create a simulation, which is that simulation with all the data I want. But talk ship, right? So show me the code. Linus, he's super awesome. Yeah. And how I can do it. So this is the time I will show my ID and just create a new class and show you how we can do it without a tool. And it's this side. And I will, for example, if I want to my factory, cool. I already have the simulation here. So public generator, I want to type here. Cool. And there's a typo, right? Probably static void. I already have the simulation object, simulation created here. Just to show you the simulation, I have a simulation here with like some attributes and with data and with builder. And what I can do, simulation, it's the simulation builder, and I can build it. And in order to do so, I can have .cpf, which is a string, .amount, there is a new big decimal, let's say this, and I have an amount, and I won't create everything, but you guys, now amount is a big decimal, but doing amount again. So installments is an integer. So you guys can have it, right? So as soon as you are adding data to that object, you can have it, and simulation, and return itself. What I could have now, I have my kind of factory, and now, so let's call it, I don't know, runner. And create a main method. And I want to print out my factory dot data generator. And then when I run it, I have my object simulation with that data, right? Super simple like that. You guys, it's super straightforward. You guys can easily understand this. And of course, if I run again, it will be exact the same data because it's fixed there. So we need to fix it. So we basically have a way, super nice way, to combine having a class, kind of factory-ish, generating that data through a model. But we need now to fix this problem of, okay, this data is all the time the same. And now it comes to the specialized tool. So there is a guy from Netherlands. His name is Jaap. He has a super nice talk called Fairlies, Fakers, and Factories. He gave in JavaLand, which is in Germany, and a super nice event for Java as well. 2021, if I'm not mistaken, or 22. comparing a lot of different tools. So I will show one specific tool, but I want to mention that you can use a lot of different tools to do it. That is like EasyRandall, JFairy, Instancio, and DataFaker. I will use DataFaker on this talk, but for example, Instancio is super nice one. It can speed up a lot if you have a lot of unit tests. It's really nice one. If you have a lot of other different layers to test, maybe you can combine all the tools, maybe you can use only one tool. You can, what I would recommend, I will show you DataFaker. I don't want to influence that much you, but you can take a look on all those tools and see what is the best for your goal. Okay? So DataFaker. DataFaker is super nice. Why? Because it's super fluent. For example, I create an instance of Faker. It's the first line, Faker, new Faker. I'm setting the locale to German, right? And look how easy it is to use DataFaker. So as soon as I have the instance, I use faker.name, and name will, of course, generate some names. Then I have like full name. I will show you in the code, but I have a full name. Then I can set finance and IBAN for that specific locale for Germany, which is a DE. I can have an email address, and I can even create expressions from the generators. For example, I'm trying to generate here in this expression birthday date in a specific format, not in the normal format that we used to have. I don't know why. Maybe I'm adding this into the database, doing something like this, but I can do it. And if you look at the comments, which would be the output, I don't speak German, but I believe Freiharing, something like this, sounds like a German name, right? I don't know, but maybe it's correct. The IBAN starting with D is valid because, of course, the IBAN starts with normally the two letters or some letters that from the country. The email address, it ends with .de, which is from Germany. So it generating data from that base locale. And it's really nice because you can generate basically in different ones, which cover before this talk that they don't have a specific locale for Ireland, which is kind of a shame, but I'm totally sure that guys will fix it, right? Yeah. Cool. So how we can fix that generation with the factory? Now I have a factory, just name it in a different way. Simulation data factory. Have it named the first method, create simulation, and I have the fixed data. What I will do, wipe out the fixed data and add the DataFaker instead, adding the tool. So now what I'm doing, CPF, just to explain to you, is the social security number in Brazil, because I'm Brazilian, that's why I added CPF. Let's put something Brazilian in the talk. And I can generate a valid CPF. Name, full name. Look at the amount. I can even tell DataFaker to, hey, generate a number between this and that. And for installments, the same thing, generate between this and that. And those numbers has a meaning, I will show you. And insurance, which is a Boolean, it's a little bit weird, thank you. But it's like faker.bol.bol, like Boolean.boolean. Why is that? I don't know, but it generates a random Boolean, which will be true or false, but anyway. Cool? So we added now the tool. So now we have, every time that we run this, we have a different data instead of that fixed ones. And then let's show the code instead of talking a little bit more. And for this one, in this runner, actually I have the simulation data factory. I will show in a minute. And I'm naming here valid simulation. Cool. When I run it, you guys can see that there is a name here, Jasmine. There is a CPF. There is an email. By the way, the email won't match the name because as it's a random data, there is no correlation between all the generators. And it's nice because I really want to get total random data. The amount and installments. Remember, the installments is between there, it's 2 to 48. And insurance is false. But remember the name? Jasmine, at least. I will run it again. Now the name is Miss Nestor Schmidt Orn. It's a little bit weird. Yeah. Cool. But I have like Julian's email, installments as 33. If I run it again, I have a totally different name, totally different email, CPF, and so on, so on, and so forth. Cool. So what I did as a magic, I created a way to generate the same set of valid data to all my tests, all the thing I want to do. And this one. The next thing, in order to generate random data, in order to be really valid, to not make it fail at any point, is to understand the data requirements. For example, for the amount installments, I have some rules in my entity. So it should be, the amount should be at least 1,000 to 40,000. Okay, this is the min max value. As the same for the installments, should be between 2 and 48. So I know my requirements now. And when I generate valid data, I should generate in that conditions to make sure, okay, it will be all the time that. If I'm running a test and I set these conditions, my test will fail, I know that I will have an issue on this validation, right? On this data requirement. How I can do this? We had that, but when I set the amount in installments, I'm saying it to, hey, generate a number between that same range. Then I know it will be valid all the time. And this is super important for us to really understand those data requirements. Remember in the first example, the age, if I'm doing some system for 18 plus as age, I need to add 18 at least, right? And I should like have the mean set, the minimum set. And I should have the method generating at least 18 years old or more. Cool. So I will show you exactly the same thing, but I'll show you the opposite as well. What does it mean? Oops. In this valid simulation in my data factory, I'm generating here the simulation that makes sense. So the name, I'm generating a middle name. CPF, a valid CPF. Internet, but look, the valid. I have constants here, min amount, installments, max installments. What are the values? Exactly what I have in my entity as a restriction for that values. Like installments, 2 to 48, amount 1,000, 40,000. Now I know that any valid data should be between those. Now, if I want to have, let's see here. If I want to have, if I want to test actually edge case where I want the installments being less than 2, how I can do it? What I did in this case, I actually just to not write more codes, I got my valid simulation and I modify my valid simulation for that specific amount field, and then I'm say, hey, generate between 1 and the mean minus 1, because the mean is 2 is valid, so minus 1 will be all the time 1, basically here. But I can do something like, hey, if I want to do an edge case exceeding the number of installments, which should be at least 48, I'm getting the same thing, valid simulation, setting the amount, and then what I'm doing, hey, get the max amount plus 1 because the max amount is valid, and do until the infinite. And I will have all the time a number for that amount that will exceed, and I can do any kind of edge case here. Cool. And what I'm constructing here in this kind of factory, I have different methods for specific things that I want. In this case, edge cases. So if I, instead of valid simulation, if I get the simulation exceeding installments, and if I run it, I will see that everything regarding the data is valid. But if I look at installments, 611, so it's higher than 48. So I know that it's not valid, and probably I'm expecting some issue or some failure or anything else. Okay. The other important part is knowing the test library for supporting data. At this moment, I want to ask Mohammed if anyone has any questions, because this part and on will change a little bit the talk as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one only question when you were talking about the testing and the data factory and these kind of things, showing how you can simulation, and I will show it here. So Vincent mentioned that. Is that what we call mutation testing?
Yes and no, Vincent. What we are doing here actually with this approach, we are actually creating edge cases. But what mutation test does, mutation test actually does these edge cases as well, but it's changed a lot of things in the codes to try to prove that the code is wrong. For example, if you have a string as a parameter and are doing something, the mutation testing will try to put an integer there as a value and try to force an error. And when there is an error, it will say, hey, it's not properly covered with tests. It does extend a little bit more. But you have like nowadays tools that are super good in even creating some of these edge cases. But in this case, like edge cases like numbers, those tools, they do it for us. But most of the time, professionally, edge cases can be more complex that the tool cannot detect it. But one good tool to do mutation testing this way that can help you a little bit with this for Java is PI test.
Great. There is also a small question and answer from Ted.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, isn't this more like property testing? Mutation testing changes the code versus test input, which you have just answered now, right now.
Yeah. Hey, Francois. Hi. Jitter. I think I pronounced your name correctly. Sorry if I didn't. We have different testing techniques. In this specific thing about the installments, it's actually the partitioning tests. So where I can partitioning the values in valid and invalid data, and I test all the extremes of that. So I need to have like a valid data between 2 and 48. In terms of testing, partitioning, I need to test one in between, just make sure everything works in that range. Then I need to test the -1 and +1 in the extremes. Like I have 2, I test the -1, which will be 1 invalid, 2, which is valid, 3, which is valid, middle will be, I don't know, 20 something. Then when I have 48, I test the -1, 47, which is valid, 48 valid, and 49 invalid. It's a testing technique that the tools does actually for us, but like I'm super this is the basically a day-by-day activity, so I already know it, but the tools helps with that. And basically there's a lot of also different techniques that are almost like this, but instead of trying to test like the extremes, they test only in between or only the edge cases, and yeah, you can get a lot of different ones. Cool.
No more questions? Continue your amazing presentation.
All right. Thank you so much. So I already told you how, and it's super easy actually, right? In 30 minutes, you guys already know how to, actually, let me show here again, like this part. You guys could learn how to use it to generate random data. And this data is actually random, and you guys can use it all the time. Before I just jump into the next part, I didn't show you to you this, but in the code, for example, the guys here already saw it, but like this faker, I just need to create the instance, and then, for example, it's a fluent builder. So I have faker, I press dot, I have a lot of methods that belongs to a group. For example, name, which is a common one. I have name. If I press dot again, so I can have different kind of names generation. For example, first name, middle name, full name, a name, last name, female, male name, and so on. And I can generate that specific kind of thing. It has a lot of different generators. We saw, for example, we can have business, and from business, we can have credit card number or anything related to credit cards as well. And you guys can see that this tool has a lot of different generators. I have a different talk for that. It's called a DataFaker specifically. You guys can take a look. You guys can take a look later at the tool, and has a comprehensive documentation with all the generators there. Back to the talk. So the last part of this talk is knowing the library, the testing library you're using for data support. And I hope all of you, if it's not all of you, are using JUnit 5. You guys here are using JUnit 5? Raise hands, no? JUnit 4? Okay. So some library for testing, like to unit testing? Spock. Spock is nice. Cool. It could be like at least 3 of these tools. JUnit 4 or 5. Try to migrate to 5, please, because it's a super nice one. TestNG is another tool that's super nice, and Spock is super nice as well. Cool. I will show JUnit 5 because it's super nice. I'm using this every day. And in JUnit 5, we have something called data-driven, which are, in terms of testings that are driven, of course, by data, right? And if you think about it, half of the tests, if it's not more, will be data-related, right? Of course, there will be some logic and testing a lot of logic, but it will involve a lot of data. JUnit has a little bit more. Those are the 5 ones that JUnit provide you to generate data. I will explain then through the slides. And from my take, the best one, I will show you the code and show a specific example of an integration test from an API test using that one. Okay? So one of the first ones is the value source. Actually, I have a preference in one of the methods, but sometimes there is a specific one that is wings in all over the place. For example, this value source is super nice because you can add an annotation, call it value source, and then you say, hey, my value source, it's a list of integers, and this list of integers is 7, 10, 12, and 40. And then the test will run 4 times, each time using that different data. One time for 7, another time for 10, another time for 12, another time for 40. Cool? And in order to do this with JUnit 5, the first thing I should do is annotate my test methods. Instead of @test, I will have a parameterized test, and then I have the specific annotation for this data interaction. And this is nice because if you need to test only integers, we have all the primitive types we have available for value source, including strings, which is not a primitive, but it's kind of primitive, right? Because, I don't know, People who would like to treat the strings as primitive, but we have all the primitives plus the string. Cool. So I'm sure that you already thought about one or two unit tests or integration tests you guys have that you could replace by value search instead of having a lot of different methods with a different name duplicating code. You guys could put one annotation and just make it repeatable. Cool. Second one, internal method source. Actually, if you look at JUnit's official documentation, it's called only value source, but it has two ways to do, internally and externally. So I'm calling here internal method source. If we look, we change the name of the specific annotation for data-driven. It's now called @method source. And this method source we have as a parameter as a method name as a string. Then in the same class, in the same test class, I have a method you guys can see in the bottom that is called ship products, which is the same name as I have in my annotation. And in order to iterate more than one type of data, remember that the value source here before, we have only one type of data, one parameter for data, right? Integer or string or Boolean or whatever. It's only one. It's only one parameter. Here, I now can create more. How I can create more? JUnit 5 has a specific way called arguments, which makes sense. It's basically parameters, but JUnit called arguments. And as I want a list of arguments or a list of data, it's a string of objects, basically, right? A string of arguments. And in this specific way, my arguments are, as you guys can see in the last three lines, a string and a big decimal, right? So it's like a micro SD card with a mount, a JBL Go with an amount, and iPad Air case with an amount. I need to know in advance which type of this, which type of the argument it is. And in my method, you guys can see void chip products that I have string product and big decimal amount. Then now I can associate. The JUnit will do this automatic association that the first argument is the product, the second argument is the amount, and it will iterate the test with the same code based on different data. Super nice one. Why it's called internal method source? Because I have this method that has the data in the same level of the class, basically inside the class, along with the test. Cool. The second one I'm calling here is external method source. What it does? The same thing as the previous one, but instead of having the method that generates the data, that has the data, inside the same test class, I can put it outside the test class. So I have another class, call it here JUnit external data, and I have the same method, the string of arguments for chip products. But how I can associate in my test? This is a little bit a drawback. I need to pass the full qualified name into my class as a string. So you guys can see here the chip product is con.eliasnogueira.datadriven.JUnit external data sharp ship products. The only drawback you can see here is if you need to refactor this at some point, it might be difficult if your IDE won't support you that better for this, because it's a string. It's not a class name, full qualified or something like this. But it works, and what you can do with this, you can have an external data class with a lot of different methods instead of only one. So I have like ship products, can have ship products, expensive products, or whatever products, like a lot of methods. What will change? The end of qualified class will have sharp and then the name of the methods, which is basically the reflection of the qualified classes do. Cool. Then I have my preferred one. This is called argument provider. Argument provider is basically the same thing as the external method source, but the difference, you have the class And in my test, the notation that I have is arguments source, and the parameter, instead of full qualified name as a class name as a string, I have the class name. And then JUnit will discover that class name, and if it's valid in some kind of formality we should do in JUnit, it's valid. What is this formality? This class must implement this arguments provider interface, and then I need to override the provide arguments method from that interface. But then after I do this, I still have the same string of arguments with the data inside. What is the possible drawback of this? If you have the same kind of set of data, let's say cheap products and expensive products, instead of having both in one class through that external way that I showed previously, you have here two different classes for that. But for me, at some point, it's valid because you can create a package for argument providers or data. You can have a lot of classes super specialized in that data generation. This is basically preference. I prefer this way, actually. Cool. The last one, that is also a valid one, is the CSV provider. Because I know that some of you, if it's not all of you, still manage legacy systems, and a lot of legacy systems in Java has CSV files in between. And sometimes it's hell to do a lot of things, even testing. But with JUnit 5, they have a specific CSV file source parameter where you can just point out to a CSV file, and of course, each column you need to know the argument type. If it's a string, if a big decimal, you need to know that object, and then JUnit will do this association for you, and you iterate your test based on all the data you have in the CSV. It's really nice if you need to actually create something, like you received some CSV file from a third party, needs to validate to see if it's valid, then you can proceed. You can easily test this like with few lines. JUnit does the rest for you. Cool. And before we move on, there is an example of the argument provider. And this I need to explain to you, but before I explain idea, I need to open the project. Cool. The same project's here. So this is actually a project that I use in all of my presentations. It's this kind of loan application. And for this loan application, I have the integration test here. And for the simulation part, which I have an endpoint, let me show the simulation controller for you. Just a second. So I have a super silly application that judge me if like you see a lot of things that could be improved. It's just for educational like presentation purpose. I have a REST controller with like request mappings, and then get, doing a get for that. I have another get for a specific path, a specific value. Then I have a post. Then I have the put. Then I have the delete. A normal CRUD operation for an API, right? Simple like that. And you might notice that I have in that simulation object, remember, let's get the simulation entity. Where is the simulation? Let me do just one thing different here. Simulation. Remember that I have an entity, and you guys probably have an entity when you develop as well, with a lot of annotations that are creating constraints. And two of the constraints I have that we saw in the presentation is the amount, minimum and maximum value, and the minimum and maximum value for the installments, right? Cool. And I know from this one, at least, I can do a lot of edge cases, right? But there is a common edge case that we do that a lot of people sometimes forget about it. It's for integration test for API. It's a nice one to test. Can you guys try to guess what it is? At least people from here, from the audience. It's 4.0 and there's a number after. It's not 403. No, sorry. It's 4. No, sorry. No, now I messed it up. It's 4.2 and there's another one. Unprocessable entity is 422, right? Right? I will give an example. I have a lot of tests here, like getting one thing and another. I'll just scroll down. And I have here. So I have, what is the test name that I have here? Should validate all the invalid scenarios. And this is awesome for not creating that much code in terms of testing you want to do. And what I'm doing, just explain first what it does, and then how through only like few lines of code I can iterate like as much as scenarios I want. So given the content type is JSON, and the body that we will be posting has an invalid simulation, when I do the post to the simulations endpoint, then status code will be unprocessable entity, and the return body, the body that returns there, right? We have the response body, has a path. This path is the key of the error when you have the unprocessable entity from common Spring, right? We have like that common error message from Spring, and the response body has a key and a message, right? And this message normally is the error message. Then this path is validation message. So this path has this specific validation message. In order to do this, I'm using a data provider, that argument provider, implements argument provider. What I'm doing here, I'm generating data for all the invalid cases. Minimum amount, maximum amount, email not valid, name not valid, and you can name it, any kind of edge case. And I actually have one method generator per each that is using DataFaker with all that previous approach. Okay? So for each one, I'm generating an object. Simulation less than min amount, simulation exceed amount, and so on. Cool? I have here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 edge cases at least, concentrated here. Now I have the invalid data that I can post, that I can use in my response body, my request body, sorry. But I need to know what is the expected path for that error and the message for that error. So what I'm doing here, when I return the strings of arguments, I'm returning 3 different things. One is the object that I will post using the request, and the other 2 are the objects I use to validate the response. And those 2, what I'm created here, I'm just created a super simple enumeration, where this enumeration has a key and message, and based on when the amount is greater, what is the key? Errors amount. What is the message? Amount must be equal or greater than X. When I have errors amount less, the key is errors amount. The message is amount must be equal or less than that. When I have the installments less, the key is different, installments. And then the message is also different. So I created a way to just control the data I'm expecting, okay? And now I have a list, a string of those arguments, and my test can now iterate in each of those. So every time it gets, for example, not valid mail, the object of not valid mail, if I look at here, I'm setting the email as an username, so it won't have at something.com and would be invalid, right? And the keys, I'm using the key message for the enumeration and that specific data set enumeration as key and message. Are you guys following? Easy, right? So I'm just like separating some responsibilities, even for tests, because it's important as well. And then when I run this, it will start Spring. And then you guys can see here, running all the scenarios in 1 second, including Spring, right? If I would have one more scenario, one more edge case to add, instead of creating one more test method, what I would do, I would go to my simulation data provider. I would create here var my other edge case with something. I just put null here. Doesn't matter now. I would add one more argument, adding my, just ignore the error, my other edge case, and I would have here one more entry, errors, other, and just ignore here as well, because I just need to do this. So error, other, another, and then errors, other, and other. I have a new test case. Have a super easy test case added here. Instead of spending more 5 minutes or asking ChatGPT to generate one more test case for me and copy and paste that and creating a lot of codes. And when you open that test class, the test class looks like a Megazord, right? Cool. So this is a super nice and easy example where you can combine the data generation approach to your tests. In this case that I showed to you in the integration test, using the knowledge and the power of the unit test library you have, in this case JUnit 5. I'm using a specific feature there that is the data providers with the arguments, and you can easily create a lot of different test conditions, and you can use all together to speed up your test creation, and actually adding more test coverage in a super easy and nice way. There will be some reference here for you later, including the project I'm using. And thank you guys. Thank you for being here with me this time. And hope that you can see all of you, most of you, in any kind of events. And I'm open now for more questions.
Thank you, Elias. It was really great presentation. And yeah, we have a couple of questions. First one from Fernanda, and I'm going to show it. So she's asking about, does the test ng still have its value? What is the difference between JUnit and testing? Which one is more performs better?
Do you know what I do, Fernanda, for choosing those? The type of testing I'm doing. If I'm doing tests that are basically unit and integration, I use JUnit 5 for sure. I use TestNG when I do a lot of things with controlled parallelization. For example, if we extend the testing strategy for the front-end part, and I have 100 tests, if I run sequentially, it will take, I don't know, 3 hours, but I can create a parallelization that. In JUnit 5, unfortunately, you cannot control exactly how the parallelization will be per instead of in group of classes or different classes. You cannot create that condition. I want this parallelization first in the first thread only with these classes, in the second thread with those classes, in the third thread with other classes. But with TestNG, you can do it. You can control your parallelization based on a lot of different things, packages, class names, etc. So if I want to do something that is more front-end oriented, like mobile or web, and I always do in the parallel way because it costs a lot, it's slow, etc., I use TestNG. If not, I'm using JUnit 5. Basically, for me, those are the main difference. Though, and both tools has data-driven approaches, has a lot of different assertions, etc. They're awesome tools, but basically the problem you solve will determine which one you use. Thank you for the question.
Thank you for the answer. That was a good question. So the next question and the final one is from our fellow Java champion, Bazl Rahman, and he's asking, have you considered using Java records instead of arguments?
No. It's a good question, but I think I need to study this. But using JUnit, the argument itself, I think I cannot replace the arguments by records directly because JUnit won't allow me. But what I could do, maybe, if it would be that part of the question, instead of having a lot of parameters for the arguments, I could add a record there. And then I could have an argument based on an object, which is a record. But the arguments actually, I now understand a little bit because the arguments looks like a record, actually. I believe that's why you asked the question. But from my knowledge from JUnit, unfortunately, no, you must use arguments because it's the way JUnit will use that data for data-driven. But you could use the records inside the arguments to have an object with a lot of data.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you
you
for the
mean
question.
that argument is an object that is part from the framework?
Yeah, it's part of the framework. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And inside argument, you can have this kind of argument as a record, and you don't need to have to repeat a lot of fields. So to
Yeah.
be more dynamic, whatever you add it, you have it in your test case.
And even more
Exactly.
readable, because if you have like 7 parameters, 10 parameters, would be how to manage, not how to manage a little bit, but to understand as well.
So this was the final question. I would like to thank everyone. Everyone is welcoming you in the comments, which is great. You have a great speaker. Thank you for your presentation. If your audience have questions, you can take it.
Yep. You guys can also ask me in the socials, in Twitter, Blue Sky,
Yep.
etc. I will be happy to help.
Does anybody have a question?
Here? No, you guys want a Guinness? The guys here want a Guinness.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
All of the
Thank you.
things on the chat.
Okay, that was great. Thank you very much for your time, Elias. Enjoy with the Dublin jug. And also tomorrow, I would like to remind this the last day of the conference. There is more interesting also. And as usual, sessions. See you tomorrow, guys, and have a nice day.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you all.
Thank you, Elias.
Bye.
Thank you.